How to know whether Ukraine's counteroffensive is working. By launching its long-planned counteroffensive, Ukraine has just taken a decisive step down the path of driving Russian forces from its territory. But it is early days still, and there is much we don't know. Confusion is the only thing you can count on during a moment like this. During 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan as a brigade commander and a director of operations, I often had great difficulty visualizing and understanding what was going on in a fight, even with the latest command and control systems. And I certainly was never involved in a fight as large, violent and disorienting as the battles underway in Ukraine. Reports from field commanders to their leaders are typically incomplete and confusing. Drones help, but technology will never fully succeed in lifting the fog of war. Although Western audiences justifiably want to understand how the fight is going in real time, we should remember the axiom that first reports are never as good or as bad as they sound. I think the Ukrainians can and will win this fight. But the summer is likely to be long and difficult. We will not be able to judge how successful the counteroffensive has been for quite some time. That said, here are some things to keep in mind in these early days. While the counteroffensive has been launched, I do not think the main attack has yet started. The Ukrainian General Staff will want to keep the Russians guessing about where it will take place for as long as possible. So far, it appears that the Ukrainians are still probing for vulnerabilities they can exploit and reinforcing local tactical successes. As a result, a few villages have been liberated, and about 100 square kilometers of territory have been recaptured. We will know the main attack has started when we see large groupings of armored forces, 2 or 3 armored brigades attacking in one direction. How large is a brigade? Ukrainian tank battalions usually contain 31 tanks, and armored infantry battalions have a similar number of armored vehicles. Each battalion will also contain additional armor-carrying engineers, air defense and logistics. An armored brigade would have 4 or 5 tank and armored infantry battalions. A typical Ukrainian brigade therefore is likely to have at least 250 armored vehicles of different types. To date, we have not yet seen these kinds of large armored formations hit the battlefield. The Russians have built hundreds of miles of trenches, of varying quality, minefields, anti-tank ditches and dragon's teeth obstacle belts. These defenses will undoubtedly present challenges to Ukraine's attack. But defenses are only as good as the soldiers occupying those trenches and covering those obstacles. I'm waiting to see if the Russians fighting from them are more effective in defense than they were on the attack. The vicious infighting we see between the various Russian military leaders and mercenary bosses highlights the lack of cohesion on the Russian side. I expect Ukraine to seek to exploit this. A breakthrough along any part of the line could end up being catastrophic for Russian forces as chaos sets in. Breaking through enemy lines is never easy. Ukraine will suffer setbacks. Images of at least one wrecked Leopard tank and several Bradley fighting vehicles got a lot of visibility on Twitter and subsequently in media outlets. Such images are not a reliable indicator of how the fight is going. But they are a reminder that a cakewalk victory is unlikely. Ukraine is in an existential fight. How long it takes and how many lives it costs greatly depends on what additional support the West offers. Ukraine will need to be resupplied as the war grinds on. The Biden administration announced earlier this week that it will provide an additional $325 million for air defense, artillery, anti-tank weapons and armored vehicles. This is good. But longer-range weapons, such as the Storm Shadow missiles that Britain delivered earlier this year, would be even more useful as they would shorten the war. President Biden has been hesitant to send the similar MGM-140 Army Tactical Missile System, ATACMS, pronounced Attack EMS, to Ukraine. I hope he reconsiders. The Biden administration has said it has given Ukraine what it thinks it needs to succeed, suggesting it is up to Ukraine to make maximum use of what it has. This kind of stance can lead to a passive complacency, watching and waiting for battlefield results. But what Ukraine needs right now are not spectators. It needs ATACMS. How to know whether Ukraine's counteroffensive is working. By launching its long-planned counteroffensive, Ukraine has just taken a decisive step down the path of driving Russian forces from its territory. But it is early days still, and there is much we don't know. Confusion is the only thing you can count on during a moment like this. During 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan as a brigade commander and a director of operations, Xi Jinping revered his father. So why isn't he more like him? Despite President Xi Jinping's efforts to expel supposedly pernicious Western influences from his country, the People's Republic of China, like much of the world, will celebrate Father's Day on June 18. Many Chinese recognize that the holiday is a bourgeois commercial import designed to enhance gift-giving and the hum of merchant cash registers. Yet, the Western-style Father's Day, along with Mother's Day, has long been a Chinese family favorite, even among many Communist Party members. Indeed, given the party's surprising resurrection of traditional Confucian philosophy a couple of decades ago, there has probably been increasing social support for Father's Day in China. Filial piety, especially the principle of obeying and honoring one's father, is a central tenet of Confucianism. During the past decade of his unchallenged rule, to bolster the spirit of Chinese nationalism, Xi Jinping has frequently endorsed Confucianism despite its feudal origins and has rendered many tributes to his father, the veteran first-generation communist leader Xi Zhongshuan. Xi's father had run afoul of Chinese Communist Party chairman Mao Zedong in 1962 and been subjected to 16 years of harsh internal exile before being allowed to return to a prominent position in the party leadership after Mao's 1976 death ended the Cultural Revolution. Xi Jinping has occasionally dropped hints that his father might deserve a place in communist history equal to Deng Xiaoping's. Xi Zhongshuan was indeed broadly respected among the post-Mao elite, not only because of the many years of political suffering to which he had been unfairly subjected, but also because of the wisdom he brought back from exile. His most important contribution was the emphasis he placed on freedom of speech. The party leadership must allow differences of opinion, he repeatedly preached, if the party hoped to achieve its goals. People should be encouraged to think, speak out and act, and the party should respect their views and criticisms, he maintained. His words offered strong support for many of the exciting liberal political, economic and social reforms that struggled for recognition from 1978 to 1988. These were not mere platitudes, as Xi Zhongshuan's actions often showed. While leading Guangdong province in 1978 before his return to Beijing, he publicly commended a local prosecutor who had been bold enough to criticize him, and urged all officials to study the prosecutor's example. He worked to overturn the criminal convictions of many Cultural Revolution victims who had been prosecuted for expressing their political opinions. He helped secure the release from prison of 3 lawyers who had been detained for 4 years because of their vigorous legal defense of a defendant charged with rape. He promoted enactment of the People's Republic of China's first administrative litigation law to make it possible for people to challenge